So we'll have just one more class on Wednesday. There'll be a review session before the final, as we did last time, and we'll be sending out an email with the details of that. But we're going to try and put it in this time in this room again if we can. But next week we'll have reading week, so things should be a little bit more available. Is it a question? The multiple choice part of the final is not going to be cumulative, but the essay questions are going to be cumulative. And the essay questions we should have ready by Wednesday. The latest will be Thursday. So we'll send the essay questions out by email, and it'll be the same format as last time. You'll have 5 essay questions. 3 of them will be on the exam. You'll have to do 1. You'll have more time this time because we'll have the full 3 hours. But the assumption is you should figure it'll be about as long as the essay that you did in the previous for the previous midterm. So it won't be the format of the exam is essentially going to be exactly the same as it was for the midterm. So you should calibrate by how well you did on the midterm. And the bunny papers are being graded right now, and they'll probably, they won't be done this week, but they should be done by before we have the final, but we'll actually have all the physical papers with comments on them at the final. So the very latest that we'll find out about the grade on the bunny papers will be at the final, but they should actually be posted before then, so sometime next week. Let me see, are there any other kind of technical questions? And then next time we'll hand out the course evaluations and send out an email with the essay questions in advance. Yeah? No, the final's going to be exactly the same as the midterm. Okay. Now you'll have a little more time, so you can work a little more on getting the essays together. But don't think about that as an opportunity to just write more pages in the essay. Think about it as an opportunity to, say, do an outline before you actually get to the pages for the essay, so the essay is more structured and you can make more sense out of it. So you don't really want the essays for the final to take up. You don't want to be sitting there for that whole 3 hours. My expectation would be that after an hour 10 minutes, most people are going to be gone because you shouldn't take that much longer. But if you do take the extra time, use it to try to do things like do an outline rather than using it to just write more. And we'll have. I'm getting so old. Did I just say that we were going to have a review session? All right. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so what we're going to do today and on Wednesday is talk about gender development. And what I'm going to do is today we're going to talk about some of the milestones in gender development, the things that happen at different stages of development. And then on Wednesday we're going to talk about some of the theories about why it is that things happen in that particular order and in that particular way. Here we go. Okay, so starting in infancy, babies already seem to be sensitive to sex differences. And there are studies that show, for example, that you can show babies a point-light picture of another baby. A point-light picture means a picture that you make by putting little lights on all of the joints of someone's body and then letting it, and then just filming in the dark and showing the pattern by which the body is moving. So you're not seeing any of the details of the body, you're just seeing the way that the body moves. And there are interesting studies that show that by the time they're 9 months old, babies already react differently to a baby's movement that is the same sex as they are or a different sex than they are. So they already seem to be sort of recognizing, oh, this baby is moving in a way that's similar to the way that I move, and this other baby is moving in a way that's not as similar to the way that I move. So babies are already detecting things about sex differences, although whether you should really call them sex differences or not is kind of a moot point, but they're detecting things about the way that other babies move that, in fact, are connected to sex differences. So babies are already sensitive to some of the features of other babies that are relevant to sex differences. But for the most part, in infancy, you don't see differences in the ways that girls and boys are behaving. Although you do, from literally the time babies are born, already see differences in the way that they're being treated by parents. So there are studies, for example, that simply take the same baby, dress him up in girls' clothes, call him Augusta instead of Augustus, and then have people interact with him. And what they've discovered is that if you just think that a baby is a boy or a girl, adults will interact with babies differently in ways that you can predict. They'll toss out the boy more, they'll talk more face-to-face with the girl. So literally, from the time that babies are born, boys and girls are already being treated differently just because they're boys or girls. And that's one of the many reasons why, as we'll see in a minute, it's very hard to sort out whether gender differences that you see later on are the result of nature or are the result of nurture. So infants already are sensitive to some things about gender differences, but from the time they're born, they're being treated differently based on their gender. By the time babies reach childhood, children start showing some distinct patterns of behavior that are gender typical. So in particular, you see more sort of rough and tumble play from boys, you see more high physical activity, and you see more kind of fine motor coordination from girls. But again, given that since the babies have had 2 years of being treated differently, it's a little hard to know exactly what the origins of those differences are. But by childhood, you start to see these differences in the way that the boys and girls are behaving. And by the time children are 2 or 3, they start to know that they're a boy or a girl. So they start to identify themselves as being a boy or a girl, and they start to sort out the people around them as being, the other children around them as being boys or girls. And at around that time, you start also seeing behavioral differences. So that particularly in things that are sort of sex-typed anyway, like whether you play with the dolls in the preschool or you play with the trucks in the preschool, you start seeing the little girls playing more with the dolls in house sets, and you start seeing little boys playing more with the trucks and the fire engines. During the preschool years, you start seeing more and more of this differentiation in sex-type play. So during the preschool period, children are moving more and more in the direction of gender segregation. So it looks like in infancy, you don't really see much gender segregation. In toddlerhood, you sort of start to see it showing up. You start to see babies even having a concept of gender segregation. And during the period from preschool to school age, you start to see more and more gender segregation. And you can sort of see, if you look at the difference between 4.5-year-olds and 6.5-year-olds, by the time children are 6.5, they're much more likely to be playing with children who are the same sex than children who are the opposite sex or playing in a group of children where there's a mixed sex group. So 4-year-olds are already showing a preference for same-sex play, but it's much less drastic, much less dramatic than the preference that you start seeing in 6.5-year-olds. And that preference for same-sex play seems to continue all the way through to adolescence. So all the way through middle school up to adolescence, you're seeing the children playing more with children of the same sex. One of the other things that may be related to this that happens in the preschool period is that children start to develop something that psychologists call gender constancy. And gender constancy is actually, as I said before, by the time children are 2 or 3, they recognize that they're boys or girls. But you'll often hear 2 and 3-year-olds and even 4 and 5-year-olds saying that they're going to change their sex when they grow up. So they think that they might be a little boy now, but they could turn into a woman or a mommy when they grow up, or vice versa. I'm a little girl now, but I might grow up to be a man. And this is something that you see sort of universally. This isn't just, say, children who are going to be transgender. This is just children in general in the preschool period don't seem to recognize that gender is one of these constant properties. And there's some evidence that part of what happens is that as children start to recognize and think of gender as being a constant property, they start to be more sex stereotyped. So even when children are in circumstances, say even a child where dad stays home and takes care of them and mom goes out to work, when they get to be about 4 or 5, we'll start saying things like, mom's staying home and take care of babies and daddy's go out to work. And we think that that's because they're getting this concept of a constant, essential gender. So they're starting to divide up the world in terms of gender categories when they start to be 3 or 4. And they seem to do that somewhat independently of the social constraints of the gender categories around them. So it's a way for the children to start making sense out of the patterns around them. And remember, when we talk about cognitive development, one of the things we saw is that children will often overgeneralize those patterns. They're such pattern-seeking animals that if they see anything that might be a kind of cue to a pattern, then they'll really emphasize that pattern. So you could think about gender concepts in preschoolers as being kind of like when they over-regularize the past tense, when they say, I holded the baby, thanks. I holded the rabbits instead of saying I held the rabbits. That's a case where the children actually saying isn't accurate, but it makes sense because they're trying to find the rule. And the child whose mom actually goes out to work, but who says, oh no, mommy's staying home and take care of the children, is sort of doing the same thing. They're trying to sort the world out into these categories. And sorting the world out into those categories seems to be connected to the fact that children are actually showing more differentiated gender play themselves. We'll talk about that a little bit more next time. So by around 7, children seem to have attained gender constancy, and they have this kind of essentialist picture of what gender is all about. There's something that's essentially being a girl, and something that's essential about being a boy. And it's only around 9 or 10 in middle childhood that children start to recognize that gender is actually a social category. So that it isn't just something that's a kind of essential part of someone, that they necessarily have all of these properties that go together. They start to recognize that part of what goes on with gender is a social category. So whereas the 5-year-olds will sort of say, well, look, if you're a little boy, then you have a penis, and you are a fireman, and you play with trucks, and you go out to work. By the time children are 9 or 10, they start recognizing that many of those things have to do with social conventions and social categories, not with something that's actually essential to the person. And another development in middle childhood is that children start to realize that gender discrimination is unfair, and they start to recognize when it's happening and when it occurs. So even 9 or 10-year-olds already are recognizing that, at least all the work I'm talking about so far is, of course, in our culture, are starting to recognize that it's unfair for boys and girls to be treated differently. I was reading to my boys at one point one of these children's books about ancient Rome, and one of the things it said about ancient Rome was that the boys all went to school, but the girls weren't allowed to go to school. And I remember my son saying to me, that's terrible, that's so unfair, that's really awful. And I was so pleased that he was showing this appreciation of gender discrimination, and he said, well, the boys have to go to school, but the girls can get out and go to school. So all of us are more likely to notice discrimination against us than against other people, but by middle childhood, children are starting to recognize that. And again, by middle childhood, boys and girls peer groups start establishing different gender role norms for behavior. So in other words, what starts happening is that there's a sense of what is the appropriate kind of thing for boys to do and what's kind of the appropriate thing for girls to do. And often those standards are standards of, not too surprisingly, about things like self-assertion for boys, masculine emotion for boys, all the things that we think of as being masculine stereotypes, and things like affiliation and sympathy and warmth for girls. So this is already happening in middle school period. Yeah? Right. That is a good question, and I don't know what the answer to it is. My assumption is that they would, but I don't know whether that's actually true. It certainly is true that you can see that one of the big differences, we'll get to this in a minute, in the way that parents treat boys and girls, is that boys are supposed to be hiding emotions, especially vulnerable emotions, from very early on. So things like don't cry when you fall down, that's something that you're already seeing addressed more to boys than to girls. And by the time you get into the school age period, again, this isn't just being enforced by parents of the outside world. A lot of it is being enforced in the peer group itself. So even when people from the outside world are saying, no, girls and boys can do the same things, then the children themselves are saying, no, if you're a girl, you have to act this way, and if you're a boy, you have to act that way. So the children are starting to recognize that these are social norms, but they're also starting to enforce them as social norms, even in, say, a school age group, in the school age group themselves. And the general picture, and this is true again from development all the way through, is that gender stereotyping tends to be more rigid for boys than it is for girls. And this seems to be true from the time that they're infants all the way up to the time of adulthood. So girls can break the gender stereotypes. Girls can be tomboys a lot more easily than boys can be girlish boys. There's much more constraint on boys than there is on girls. Yeah? Well, that's a good question, and everything I'm going to be talking about today is within our culture. But there seems to be some evidence for it across cultures. But it has to be said, there are cultures where the idea that, for instance, so there's cultures where there's categories of, say, boys who are girl-like, and everyone just kind of recognizes that these are boys who are girl-like, and they function in the society to do different kinds of things, and you could just decide that you're one of the people in that category, which even has its own special name, as opposed to just being like all the other boys. So it's not clear how universal this is, but it certainly seems to be true broadly in European American cultures. And the more differentiation there is, the more the pressure is on the boys to conform to the gender stereotype. And as we'll see, we'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about sexual identity. That continues to have consequences throughout the rest of people's lives. So it's even now that it's become much easier for people to come out as bisexual, it's still easier for a woman to be bisexual or to be a lesbian than it would be for a man than it is for a man. So if you've been following, everyone's sort of waiting to see whether the first gay major league sports player in America is going to come out. And a woman who was a major league basketball player didn't even come out. She'd always been gay, and she mentioned in passing that she was gay. And one of the interesting things was everyone said, "Oh, okay, well that doesn't really count because it's a woman, right?" What we're really waiting for is for when one of the NFL football players comes out. That will be the big deal. Yeah. He did? No, I did not know that. Oh, good. Okay, so my lecture is now out of date. You should check. I should check the times. I will update it. Okay, and in adolescence, so in school age, what you start seeing is this greater segregation of the sexes and more of a sense of sexual identity, but you also start getting, for the first time, the idea that sexual identity is something that's socially constructed. And again, that's kind of good and bad, because it's socially constructed, children will start enforcing social norms, especially for boys, but they also start recognizing that if it's social, that means that it could change. And when you look at adolescence, you get this really interesting pattern where, on the one hand, so what happens in adolescence is, first of all, you stop having this gender-segregated play. So in adolescence, you start having boys and girls interacting more and more, whether they're sort of proto-dating or just being involved in friendships. There isn't any more boy cooties and girl cooties, and everybody stays away from one another. And you start getting sexuality emerging. And all of that means that there's pressure to intensify some of those traditional sex roles. So in adolescence, children are basically, their big cognitive project is to figure out how all this sexuality stuff works, and that can intensify the pressures to actually have gender differentiation in adolescence. On the other hand, as children's cognitive development is increasing, adolescents seem, one of the things in adolescence is this sense of risk-taking and exploration and questioning the conventions that they've already inherited. That's kind of one of the agendas of adolescence. That's part of the agenda of what adolescence is all about. And that means that there's more questioning of things like sex roles at the same time. And in fact, that's kind of interesting, because if you look across cultures and even across species, adolescence is actually the place where cultural innovation takes place. So when you get a culture to change, very often what happens is it's the adolescents who actually start doing things in the new way, and then other people will sort of adopt it from the adolescents, rather than that, say, the 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds who've been doing something for 50 years change their mind and start to decide that they're going to do something different. So adolescence is this interesting time, because it's a time when some of the pressures of the society are really starting to be felt, but it's also characteristically, again, not just in our culture, but in other cultures, even in other primates, it's the time when you see cultural innovation. So for example, famously, one of the examples of culture in primates is that a bunch of Japanese macaques figured out how to take sweet potatoes and dip them in the ocean to make them salty and wash off sand. Great example of animal culture. And then all the other macaques figured out how to do this. Well, it turns out that the first macaque to do it was actually a preteen, sort of the equivalent of a 14-year-old. And it was all the other equivalent of 14-year-old macaques who were the first people to adopt it. And then the women adopted it, and the old silverback macaques kind of like, no, we're not going to do what these whippersnappers. This dipping sweet potatoes in the sea is obviously a sign of the end of civilization as we know it. We're not going there. I can actually tell you a somewhat funny story, which I am evidently proud of. This last week in the Wall Street Journal, so I read a science column for the Wall Street Journal, and I wrote a column about gay marriage as an example of cultural evolution, in which I just said all the things I've just been saying to you, that gay marriage is a really good example of this tension in human beings between our having cultural traditions and yet our having this capacity for cultural innovation, and the fact that when you did public opinion polls, the millennial generation completely accepted gay marriage in a way that earlier generations didn't, was an example of this process of cultural evolution that's very important to us biologically as human beings. So the funny part is, as you can imagine, in the Wall Street Journal, I got all sorts of nasty comments, but an entire thread of the nasty comments was about how the Wall Street Journal was hiring these kids right out of college who obviously had done nothing but blog their entire lives, and these young teenage bloggers thought that they could actually write a column in the Wall Street Journal and tell their elders and betters what they should think about gay marriage. And here was this person who was obviously just citing the things that she just had in her undergraduate developmental psychology course and acting as if she could write about this in the Wall Street Journal. So I was kind of pleased to be a teenage blogger, but I felt as if I should maybe write a little correction that said, no, Alice Gothic is not actually a teenage blogger. Okay. So gender comparisons, what are some of the, so what I've been talking about so far is really about children's own conceptions about gender, their own ideas about what gender they're in or how people should behave in different gender groups and so forth. What about actual differences between genders? Well, the first really important thing to point out is that whenever a gender difference gets found, there's much more within group variance than there is between group variance. So this is a kind of hypothetical graph that is typical of the kinds of graphs you see in studies that show gender differences. So you can see almost all the differences within groups. So there's much more difference on spatial ability or on rough and tumble play or on aggression. There's much more difference among different men and different women than there is between men and women as a group, even when you find these differences. And one of the important points is, and this is one of those problems in science, of course, if you don't find a sex difference, then you don't report it because nobody makes a big deal about it. And if you do find a sex difference, then it kind of counts and you can actually get to publish it. So it means that sex differences get really, the idea that there are sex differences gets really exaggerated in the science because of all the times when you don't find sex differences, nobody pays any attention to it. Yeah? Yeah. No, I think that's exactly right. And in fact, I've actually had real arguments with one of my colleagues about this because he always has 50% males and 50% females and reports males and females in his studies. And at one point, and that was kind of the standard practice, and at one point I said, we don't report sibling position, which we know has a big influence on development. We don't report height. We don't report any of these other things. That's just sort of assuming that we're going to find gender differences rather than other differences. And I don't do it anymore. So if gender difference kind of leaps out at me, then I'll report it, but I'm not going in assuming that that's where I should be looking for differences. Another thing to say about these differences is that is something called the effect size. And the effect size means there's two different kinds of things that we can do in psychology. We can test a lot of people and see if the difference is statistically significant. But the fact that it's statistically significant doesn't necessarily, so you wouldn't have just found it by chance, doesn't necessarily tell you how large the difference is. So effect size is, given that there is a difference, that the difference is there more than you expect by chance, how big a difference actually is it actually? So you can say things about the differences in effects. And even when you get gender differences that are statistically significant, the typical, so here's an example. So you can have these different effects of gender, right? So these are statistically significant, but then they can have different effect sizes, different degrees. And when you do meta-analyses of studies, so you take many studies and put them all together, what comes out is when there are gender effect sizes, they're almost always small. So they're not big effects, they're not big differences. And so at least some people have suggested the sort of default hypothesis is more that in other words, the genders are much more similar than they are different. We focus on the differences. But if you forgot everything that you knew about gender, and you treated gender like it was blue eyes and brown eyes, and you said, okay, we're going to look at all the blue eyed people and all the brown eyed people, and we're going to see if they're different, what you'd end up saying is, you know what, there really isn't any difference between blue eyed and brown eyed people. There's a few little small effects, but it isn't that different. So if you were just sort of looking at the data without the fact that we think that gender is so important, you wouldn't be seeing something that looked like really large effect size differences. Nevertheless, there are some differences. So as I mentioned, early in life, you can do these experiments where you dress up a little boy as a little girl, and no one can actually tell the difference. They're very similar in their size and appearance and abilities. And not poor Augie, but poor Augie's daddy, Augie, is blonde and blue-eyed.